The room froze the moment her voice cut through the velvet silence. 11-year-old Amina stood in the center of billionaire Charles Harrington's private gallery, her small finger lifted toward a $42 million Monet. Her eyes didn't blink. Her voice didn't tremble. Ce n'est pas un Monet, c'est une copie. This painting is fake. Executives stiffened. Security stepped forward. Chandeliers hummed above them, catching the panic spreading across the walls like wildfire. Harrington's face twisted in disbelief. His CFO, Mr. Langford, exploded, "Don't listen to a child!" But Amina didn't look at him. She stared at the canvas, with the sharp, unshakable certainty of someone who knew the truth before anyone dared to see it. And in that instant, the mansion's greatest secret began to crack open. Amina hadn't meant to be in the gallery that day. She was only there because her mother, Clara, had begged the shift manager for 1 extra hour of work. Rent was late again. The electricity bill waited like a silent threat on their kitchen counter. So Clara brought her daughter along, hoping she could finish dusting the east wing before Harrington returned. Amina sat quietly on a small wooden stool near the service elevator, a notebook balanced on her knees. She always carried it, filled with sketches, color theories, and tiny swatches she practiced identifying by memory. Her grandmother, a former art teacher in Dakar, had taught her how to read light, how to sense rhythm in brush strokes, how to understand that every painting carried a heartbeat. By age 10, Amina could identify impressionist techniques with uncanny accuracy, switching between French and Wolof effortlessly, fluently. Clara often whispered, "You have a gift, mon cœur." But gifts don't matter in houses like these. Stay quiet. Stay invisible. But invisibility never suited Amina. Every afternoon, she'd wander near the gallery entrance, watching priceless paintings that lived in the world she could only dream of. She didn't know it yet, but one detail she noticed today would rewrite the fate of everyone in that mansion. Harrington's gallery wasn't just decoration. It was the backbone of a $300 million empire. Insurance contracts, museum partnerships, and an upcoming international auction depended on every piece being authentic. Unexposed forgery could collapse his reputation overnight. And the Monet Amina pointed at? It was the crown jewel. The piece Harrington planned to unveil to the world in just 7 days. Clara moved through the mansion the way some people move through storms. Head down, careful, praying nothing strikes her. For 8 years, she had cleaned Harrington's hallways, polished his marble floors, and dusted the priceless art she wasn't allowed to look at for too long. One mistake could cost her everything. Her supervisors spoke to her like she was furniture. Langford barely acknowledged her existence unless something went wrong. Yet Clara endured because endurance was the only currency she had left after immigrating alone, raising Amina with 2 jobs and sending money home to her aging mother. Amina knew the weight her mother carried. She saw it in the tension of her shoulders, in the way she hid her exhaustion behind forced smiles, in the whispered prayers before each shift. Let me finish the day without trouble. But Amina also inherited her grandmother's stubborn truthfulness. She refused to shrink herself just to make wealthy people comfortable. Clara feared that one day this honesty would bring danger. She didn't realize, not yet, that today would be the day her daughter's courage collided with the mansion's darkest secret. Harrington had flown in 2 European evaluators that week, experts with crisp suits, clipped accents, and eyes that scanned art like scanners built for profit, not passion. Amina overheard them in the corridor, arguing in hushed tones about pigment inconsistencies and rhythmic deviations in one of the gallery's signature pieces. She paused. Rhythm? She knew Monet's rhythm better than her own heartbeat. Later, while Clara dusted the gallery, Amina walked past the Monet and froze. The shadows, the cadence of the strokes, the temperature of the blue pigments. Something pulsed wrong. Not sloppy. Not accidental. Wrong. A whisper of dread threaded through her chest. If this painting was flawed, if she was right, Then someone in this mansion was hiding a massive crime. Clara brought Amina back the next morning, only for 1 hour, she promised. But whispers spread through the staff halls the moment they entered. Executives paced the gallery. Security tightened. Something was brewing. Something dangerous. Amina felt it. A storm gathering behind polished walls and perfect paintings. That's when Mr. Langford arrived. Harrington's cold-blooded CFO, the man who turned numbers into threats and staff into shadows. His polished shoes sliced across the marble. His glare landed on Clara first, then dropped to Amina with open disgust. "Children," he muttered, "do not belong near million-dollar art." His presence alone shifted the room's temperature. The private gallery wasn't merely a room, it was Harrington's kingdom. A cathedral of glass, marble, and curated history. Sunlight poured through skylights and soft gold ribbons, touching the canvases as if invited. Every brushstroke seemed to glow. Every frame whispered prestige. Amina entered behind her mother, small footsteps echoing across the polished floor. She felt the shift instantly. The air was tight, not with elegance, but with fear. Executives circled the gallery like vultures dressed in designer suits. Whispers darted between them, sharp enough to cut the silence. "Something's off with the Monet. Insurance will murder us if this gets out." "Langford says keep quiet." Amina drifted toward the center of the room. Drawn as if by an invisible thread, she paused beside the Monet. There it hung, massive, breathtaking. A swirl of blues and soft greens, dancing like water under spring sunlight. At first glance, it looked perfect. Too perfect. Amina stepped closer. Her breath steadied. Clara watched nervously, wiping a statue's base but keeping one terrified eye on her daughter. Amina noticed something adults never saw. The shadows beneath the water lilies were slightly muted. Monet layered shadows with emotional weight. They vibrated softly, alive. But these shadows were hollow, flat, as if someone copied emotion instead of feeling it. She blinked, stepped even closer. A brushstroke curved left where Monet would always curve right. A single stroke. Small, invisible to the untrained eye. But not to her. Amina slid her fingertips across the air. Not touching the painting, just tracing its rhythm. Langford's voice snapped from behind. "Step away from the artwork!" Amina flinched, but her eyes remained locked on the canvas. Harrington entered. Tall, silver-haired, confident in the way only old money could be confident. He walked with controlled arrogance, surveying his gallery like a king inspecting subjects. "A child in my gallery," he muttered to Clara. His tone wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Clara bowed her head, apologizing instantly. "I'm so sorry, sir." "She'll stay quiet, I prom." But Amina didn't hear her mother's voice anymore. She was studying something else now. The paint didn't age correctly. Original Monet oils cracked in soft spiderweb patterns over decades. This canvas showed artificial microcracks, patterns too linear, too uniform, too machine-controlled. Her heartbeat quickened. As employees repositioned security stanchions and art evaluators reopened their notes, Harrington stepped to the Monet and admired it proudly. "Soon," he said to Langford, "this masterpiece will headline our European exhibition. Millions will see it," Amina whispered under her breath. "Millions will see a lie." Langford spun like he'd been slapped. "What did you say?" Amina stepped back, her hands trembling, not from fear, but from fury. Clara grabbed her wrist gently, pleading with her eyes. "Not now. Please, not now." But Amina's attention shifted to the painting beside the Monet. A smaller Degas. Pink ballet slippers. Soft amber lighting. Another flaw. The varnish gloss. Wrong grade, wrong reflection. That wasn't how Degas captured light. She walked toward the far wall, scanning frames, pigments, strokes, textures. Her small frame moved like a seasoned investigator. "Not a child," Clara whispered urgently. "Amina." "Stay close, please." But it was too late. Amina had entered the zone, the silent, electric space where everything around her dissolved except art and truth. Another piece. A Renoir. Wrong warmth. Wrong layering. The patterns deepened, connecting like constellations in a night sky only she could interpret. Those paintings didn't belong together. Not historically, not stylistically, not in any legitimate private collection. Someone had been replacing originals with sophisticated forgeries. Someone who had access, authority, power. A gust of cold air swept through Amina's spine as realization hit her. This wasn't one fake painting. This was an operation. She inhaled sharply. Langford noticed. "Why is she looking at the paintings like that?" he snapped. An evaluator cleared his throat. "Well, to be honest, sir, she's observing the technique very—" Langford cut him off. "Do not entertain whatever she thinks she's seeing." But Amina didn't back away. She stood before the Monet again, close enough to see tiny inconsistencies no adult noticed. Clara mouthed silently, "Please." "Not here." But Amina's voice found its own courage, because the truth was burning in her chest, because silence hurt more than fear, because someone had to say it, and Amina realized that someone was her. She lifted her chin, her voice gathering fire. A mansion full of powerful adults held their breath, just seconds before a child shattered their illusion. Amina stepped forward, small, steady, unshaken, and pointed directly at the Monet. "This painting is fake." Her voice rang through the gallery like a cracked bell, sharp enough to shatter the whispered conversations in an instant. Executives froze. Evaluators straightened. Security stiffened. Langford's jaw unhinged. "What did you just say?" His voice wasn't loud. It was lethal. Amina didn't blink. She repeated slower this time, in flawless French. "Ce n'est pas un Monet, c'est une copie." Clara gasped and stepped in front of her daughter. "I'm so sorry. She didn't mean. She's just a child." But Amina sidestepped her mother gently, eyes locked on the canvas. Harrington moved closer, confusion silently wrestling his pride. "You're accusing me of owning a forgery?" Amina nodded once. Langford barked, "Don't listen to a child! She's here to clean, not critique $1,000,000 paintings." His voice cracked against the marble walls, but Amina raised her hand again, this time pointing to a specific brushstroke. "The rhythm is wrong," she said. Monet painted with breath. "This stroke," she dragged her finger across the air, "is mechanical, practiced, imitated." The room erupted. What rhythm? How would she know? "Is she trained?" A museum evaluator squinted at the stroke she indicated, and his expression changed. He leaned forward, looked again. Then again, his voice trembled. "She's right." The gallery plunged into chaos, and the first crack in Harrington's empire split open like lightning. The moment the evaluator whispered, "She's right," the gallery detonated with noise, gasps, arguments, accusations, footsteps, pounding across the marble. Langford's face twisted into something feral. "Absolutely not," he thundered, storming toward the evaluator. "You listen to me, not some—" He stopped himself, but the venom in the pause was unmistakable. Amina felt her mother's hand tighten around hers. Clara whispered, "Please, don't speak anymore." But Amina lifted her chin. Langford jabbed a finger at the evaluator. "You're incompetent. That brushstroke analysis is meaningless." The evaluator swallowed. "Sir, there is an inconsistency." "Look." But Amina stepped between them, her voice soft but steady. "It's not just the brushstroke." Every head turned. She walked to the side of the canvas, motioning toward the edges illuminated by gallery lights. Monet's pigments from the 1880s have a very specific ultraviolet reflection pattern. This one, she pointed, reflects too evenly. It uses modern cobalt blends, not natural ultramarine. Silence swallowed the room. A senior evaluator blinked. You know UV pigment behavior?" Amina nodded. "My grandmother taught me. Real ultramarine ages like skin. It breathes. This one doesn't." A ripple of stunned shock moved through the experts. Langford's eyes narrowed. You little liar, he hissed. You memorized that from the internet? Amina shook her head. No, I can see it. Look. She guided the evaluator to the lower left corner. Under Monet's layering style, shadows vibrate. Here. She waved her hand slowly. They're dead. Shadows without memory. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Her daughter wasn't guessing. She was revealing. Langford exploded. I will not be lectured by... Harrington spun toward him sharply. Finish that sentence. Langford froze mid-breath, but Amina wasn't done. She moved to the side table where the evaluator's UV device rested. Without touching it, she pointed at the switch. Turn it on. If I'm wrong, the reflection will show Monet's signature micro-cracks in a wave pattern. Harrington hesitated, then nodded. Do it. The evaluator illuminated the canvas. The room held its breath. A blue haze engulfed the painting. And instead of delicate, organic cracking, uniform patterns appeared. Evenly spaced, machine-aged, wrong. A visceral gasp rippled through the crowd. Harrington staggered backward. Dear God. Langford lunged forward. This proves nothing! You hear me? Nothing! She's manipulating. But another evaluator cut him off. No, she's right. These cracks are artificial. This painting is a replica. Harrington's empire trembled as if the very marble beneath them cracked. Langford swallowed hard, panic flickering behind his eyes. Then Amina delivered the final blow, her voice soft, but devastatingly certain. If this one is fake, you should check the others. The room spun into chaos. A child, a maid's daughter, had just dismantled the foundation of a billionaire's prestige, and the storm had only begun. The gallery doors opened with a soft hiss, and the entire room shifted. A woman entered with the quiet authority of someone who did not need to raise her voice to control a kingdom. Silver hair pinned in a low knot, sharp eyes behind frameless glasses, a cane carved from dark walnut. Every evaluator straightened instinctively. Dr. Moreau, one whispered, stunned. Amina froze. Even she knew the name. Dr. Elise Moreau, the world's foremost expert on French Impressionism. The keeper of Monet's private archival records. A legend whispered through museums like a myth. The woman who could authenticate a painting with a single glance. She stepped toward the Monet replica without acknowledging Harrington, Langford, or the stunned evaluators. Her focus was absolute. She inspected the brushwork, the light behavior, the pigment, the aging. Then she exhaled sharply. Not with surprise, but with fury. This is not a Monet, she said, her accent slicing through the gallery like a scalpel. This is an insult. Langford's face blanched. Harrington stammered. Dr. Moreau, there must be some mistake. She raised a single finger, silencing him instantly. Then she turned to the smallest person in the room. You, she said softly. The girl who first noticed. All eyes snapped to Amina. Clara pulled her daughter close, unsure whether to apologize or run. But Dr. Moreau knelt slightly, just enough to meet the child eye to eye. What did you see? She asked. Amina swallowed. The gallery seemed to hold its breath. She pointed gently. The shadows are wrong. The rhythm doesn't breathe. And the blue isn't alive. Dr. Moreau studied her. Not her clothing, not her status, but her observation. You speak French? She asked. Amina nodded. Votre analyse est exacte, Dr. Moreau said with a small, rare smile. Your analysis is correct. A collective gasp echoed through the room. Dr. Moreau stood and faced the evaluators. Her voice now thundered with academic authority. This child identified what all of you missed. Langford sputtered. That's impossible. She is an observer, Dr. Moreau cut in, and art rewards those who truly see. Then she delivered the shockwave. If this piece is fake, we must inspect the entire collection. The gallery erupted. Harrington's pride cracked. Langford's facade fractured. Amina's quiet genius finally had a witness. Dr. Moreau didn't wait for permission. She turned sharply toward the nearest guard. Close the gallery. No one enters. No one leaves. A wave of panic rippled through the staff. Langford stepped forward, voice cracking. "You have no authority to—" "I have already contacted the French Cultural Ministry," Dr. Moreau said calmly. "And the Interpol Art Crimes Division." Harrington staggered. "Interpol? Elise, that's a precaution," she replied. "But necessary." Executives erupted in argument. Some demanded answers. Others defended the collection. A few whispered frantically into their phones. Amina remained still, watching everything. Then Harrington did the unthinkable. He turned to her. "Child, if more pieces are compromised," Amina's voice was steady. "They are." The room froze. A billionaire's empire hung by a thread, and that thread was held by an 11-year-old girl. Dr. Moreau moved like a storm through the gallery. Controlled, methodical, unstoppable. She approached the second wall, her cane tapping softly against marble, each strike echoing like a countdown. The evaluators followed her as if tethered by fear. Amina walked beside her, small steps. Giant truth. Dr. Moreau stopped in front of a shimmering Degas. Pastel ballerinas twirled across the canvas, delicate as breath. She examined the strokes under angled light. "Wrong blending technique," she murmured. "Degas never tapered his shadows like this." She looked at Amina. "You saw it too, didn't you?" Amina nodded. "The gloss is wrong, and the weight of the shadows." The evaluators exchanged stunned glances. Two fakes, back to back. Executives began to panic. One whispered, "Oh God, if the auction house finds out?" Another, "We are finished." But Dr. Moreau wasn't done. She moved to a smaller Renoir. Warm light, rosy cheeks, soft edges. Beautiful, yet off. She lifted her magnifier, then froze. "This one," she announced, "is not just fake. It's part of a forgery series recovered from a raid in Marseille 8 years ago." Harrington went white. "We bought this from Langford's recommended broker," Amina interrupted softly. "He replaced it." The room spun toward her. Langford barked, "Stop accusing me! You don't know what you're talking about." But Dr. Moreau turned sharply. "Actually, she does." She pointed her cane at the lower frame joint. "This frame uses the binding nails of a Marseille workshop, a known forgery syndicate. You claimed this was purchased from a private family in Belgium," Langford stuttered. That's what the document said." "Documents you handled," Dr. Moreau replied coldly. The air thickened. Executives whispered. Eyes darted. Every breath in the room became a confession hiding behind silence. Amina moved toward a lesser-known Sisley hanging in the corner. Barely noticed by anyone, but not by her. "Dr. Moreau," she said, pointing at a cluster of brush strokes. "This sky doesn't follow the wind." Moreau blinked. "Elaborate," Amina stepped closer. "In Sisley's paintings, the clouds always travel consistently, left to right in his river series, but here, they switch direction midway." Dr. Moreau whipped out her UV tool and scanned the area. Her eyes widened. "This is a composite forgery. 2 artists painted different halves." A sharp inhale filled the room. 4 fakes. Confirmed. 4. The numbers weren't random. They were intentional. Dr. Moreau walked to Harrington, lowering her voice. "Someone has been replacing originals with forgeries over several years, quietly, cleanly, systematically," Amina added, "and always pieces with high resale value." Langford's hands shook visibly. He backed away. I don't know anything about this." Dr. Moreau turned to the evaluators. "Check the acquisition receipts." An evaluator opened Langford's digital ledger. His face drained. "These invoices, they're fabricated," another evaluator whispered. "These signatures don't match, not one." Dr. Moreau nodded grimly. "A forgery ring on this scale isn't an accident. It's an operation." She looked at Amina with something deeper than admiration. A kind of recognition. "You connected the pattern before any of us did." Amina lowered her eyes. "I just saw what didn't belong." Clara's breath trembled. Her daughter, the child she tried to keep invisible, had just illuminated the darkest corner of Harrington's empire. And Langford. He was no longer the accuser. He was the prime suspect. Langford's composure shattered. He backed against the gallery wall, sweat beading at his temples, eyes flicking wildly between the forged paintings and the furious experts closing in on him. "You're all making a mistake," he sputtered. "These are coincidences, misinterpretations. You can't trust her." He jabbed a shaking finger toward Amina. Clara stepped protectively in front of her, but Dr. Moreau raised her cane in a silent command for calm. "No one is accusing the child," she said icily, "but we are accusing the man who controlled the acquisitions, the transportation, and the insurance filings." An evaluator approached with a printed sheet. "Dr. Moreau, you need to see this." She scanned it, and her expression turned lethal. "Langford," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "did you think no one would notice the payout transfers routed through your offshore account?" Langford's face collapsed. "That's not... I didn't..." But the truth was already spreading through the crowd like a shockwave, executives whispered. Security stepped quietly closer. Harrington trembled with a mix of betrayal and rage. Langford tried to straighten himself. He forced a laugh, thin, cracking. You can't prove anything. This is still all circumstantial. You have no direct link." Dr. Moreau didn't argue. Instead, she turned to Amina. "Show him." Amina hesitated, then approached the Monet replica again. She reached toward the bottom frame joint and pointed at a tiny marking burned into the wood, a brand, a symbol. Langford's symbol. A hush fell over the room. Dr. Moreau nodded. "That is the same illegal workshop signature found in the Marseille raid. And your initials, LR, are carved directly beneath it." Langford's knees buckled. Harrington stepped forward, voice trembling with cold fury. "You forged my collection, and you used my gallery as your laundering front?" Langford reached into his jacket, pulling out a sleek metal business card holder. He threw it onto the floor. Cards spilled everywhere. Each one a contact for black market art dealers across Europe. The room erupted. Langford's empire of lies had finally collapsed, and the child he tried to silence had ignited the collapse with a single sentence. The gallery felt different now, as if the walls themselves had shifted allegiance. Just minutes ago, Langford towered over everyone with unchecked authority. Now he stood small, cornered, exposed under the glare of his own deception. Security stepped forward, but Dr. Moreau lifted her cane again. "Not yet," she instructed. "Let him hear what he's truly done." The evaluators, once silent, obedient, now encircled Langford like a tribunal. Harrington turned away from him and faced the smallest person in the room. "Amina," he said quietly, "show me the next one." Gasps rippled across the gallery, a billionaire asking guidance. From a maid's daughter, Amina swallowed, but she nodded, her small hand lifted, pointing toward the Renoir on the adjacent wall. "That one," she said softly. "The light isn't consistent. Renoir's warmth always blooms. But this warmth is painted, not felt." Dr. Moreau examined it and confirmed Amina's observation with a grave nod. Langford stumbled backward. "This is insane! She's a child! She doesn't even belong here!" Harrington turned on him, and yet she saw what entire teams of experts missed. His voice cut like steel. "She belongs here more than you ever did." Langford deflated, breath shaking. Amina approached gently, not with arrogance, but with truth. "You replaced the original slowly," she said, "starting with pieces that the public wouldn't notice at first. You counted on your staff being too scared to question you. You counted on people like my mother staying silent." Clara's eyes filled. Langford opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Amina continued. "Stepping closer to the Monet, and you hid the forged pieces in places where the light wouldn't reveal their flaws. You changed the gallery bulbs last year. You blamed the electrician, but you did it to protect the forgeries," Dr. Moreau confirmed again. "Correct. This child has identified patterns consistent with professional-level forensic analysis," executives whispered now. but not about Langford. They whispered Amina's name. Harrington approached Clara. Your daughter's gift is extraordinary. Clara lowered her head. This house was never a place for her voice, sir. But it is now, Harrington replied. Langford's knees finally gave out. He dropped onto the marble, defeated, undone by a child he tried to silence. Dr. Moreau extended her hand toward Amina. Today, she said, you stand where truth stands. The power dynamic flipped entirely. Langford was no longer the judge. Amina was no longer the invisible child. The gallery had chosen its truth, and its truth-bearer. The gallery doors slammed shut as two uniformed cultural security officers entered, summoned silently by Dr. Moreau's earlier call. Their presence turned the rising tension into something sharp, something that could cut careers, reputations, legacies. Langford's breathing quickened. Harrington looked at him with a calm he hadn't shown all day, a dangerous calm. Before I knew anything about the painting, Harrington said, I knew something was wrong with you, Langford. Your panic was too rehearsed. Your outrage too polished. Dr. Moreau stepped beside him. And now, we present the final piece. She motioned toward Amina. The entire room pivoted toward the 11-year-old as if she were the axis the truth now spun around. Amina stepped forward slowly, her hands trembling, but her voice was steady, stronger than anyone expected. There's something else, she said. You didn't just replace the paintings. You replaced their provenance. Gasps rippled through the air. This accusation was no small crime. It wasn't fraud. It was heritage theft. Langford's eyes darted wildly. That's absurd. She's a child. How could she possibly— Because, Amina whispered, I read, not with arrogance. With quiet power, my mother cleans your office. You leave everything on your desk. Letters, certificates, even auction receipts. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Amina continued. One night, I was helping her clean, and I saw documents with mismatched seals. Some French, some British, some American. The fonts didn't match. The dates didn't align. And the signatures, they were traced. Her voice cracked. You didn't even do a good job hiding it. Dr. Moreau's cane tapped the floor once, sharp, final. I have reviewed the documents myself, she announced. And she is right. Every word! Langford broke. He lunged toward the table where the forged Dega sat, as if destroying evidence would save him. He didn't make it 2 steps. Security blocked him. Harrington didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even blink. Tell them, Langford. Langford shook his head violently. You don't understand. I didn't replace them. His excuses died when Dr. Moreau opened the folder in her hand. Inside were photographs. Old photographs. Langford's face went ghost pale. These, Dr. Moreau said, are images from the archives of the Musée de Lyon. Every painting you replaced was once declared missing, Harrington whispered. Stolen. Recovered, Dr. Moreau corrected coldly, and switched with replicas before they ever reached our borders. Intercepted by someone with deep access to international transport channels, she raised her gaze. Someone like your senior curator, Langford sagged. His knees buckled. But Dr. Moreau wasn't finished. And here, she said, lifting another page, is the flight manifest. 3 years ago, Paris to New York. Connecting to this estate's private vault, she stepped closer. You signed for the shipment, Langford. Collapsed into the nearest chair, like a man falling through a trap door. What did you think would happen? Harrington asked quietly. That no one would notice? That art with centuries of history could be swapped like furniture? Langford buried his face in his shaking hands. Harrington turned away from him. His voice softened. Amina, how did you know which paintings were wrong? She swallowed. Because I've seen the real ones. Her hands twisted nervously. In books, in museums, in old documentaries. I memorized them. Their colors, their light, their breathing. The gallery went silent. Not because of the crime, but because of the gift. A child who could see what the world missed. Dr. Moreau approached Amina gently. You identified what my own institution failed to detect for years. A beat. Child. What you have is not talent. It is a once-in-a-century eye. Amina trembled. Overwhelmed. Langford trembled too. But for the opposite reason, and the power in the room shifted fully. Irreversibly, the fraud had been exposed, but the revelation had only just begun. Silence didn't just settle in the gallery. It expanded, heavy, charged, threatening to snap under the sheer weight of what had just been revealed. Two security officers moved closer to Langford, but Dr. Moreau raised a calm hand. Not yet. He will answer for this, but not before we finish documenting every fragment of his deception. Her voice was ice-wrapped in velvet. Executives stood frozen, each realizing that this scandal wouldn't destroy just Langford. It would swallow everything connected to his decisions: insurance, international lending agreements, museum partnerships, government audits. It was an avalanche, and it had only just begun. Harrington exhaled through his nose, his jaw tightening with the discipline of a man who had spent decades curating a flawless public image. Retrieve the inventory, he ordered. A trembling archivist rushed to a terminal nearby, accessing the digital vault logs. As lines of data filled the screen, his face collapsed. Oh no. A hush fell. Harrington stepped closer. What am I looking at? The archivist swallowed. Tampered logs. Whole sections, overwritten. Dozens of timestamps altered. And the physical signatures recorded as verified by senior curator. Langford flinched. Dr. Moreau pressed in. How many? The archivist's voice cracked. 43 pieces. Appear compromised. Gasps. Cries. A woman clutched her chest. Someone whispered, My God. The donors. The scandal wasn't a crack anymore. It was a rupture exploding through generations of prestige. Amina stepped forward slightly, instinctively, as if following a thread only she could see. Not all are fakes, she murmured. Some pieces feel real. Others don't. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't guessing. It was perception. Sharp as a blade. Harrington turned toward her fully. How many do you think are wrong? Amina looked at the glowing screen. Her brow furrowed. Maybe half. A collective shudder passed through the room. Dr. Moreau nodded once. Decisive. Begin a wall-to-wall shutdown. Seal every exit, every storage room, every vault. The officers moved instantly. Clara touched her daughter's shoulder, a soft, trembling reminder that Amina was still a child in a world suddenly burning. But Amina didn't shrink. Not this time. Harrington returned to her. You understand what this means, don't you? Amina lowered her gaze. It means someone wanted these paintings to disappear. And why would they? Dr. Moreau asked. Amina turned slowly toward Langford. To replace their history. With your profit, Langford snapped. You have no idea what you're saying. But his voice no longer echoed through the gallery. Now it sounded small, shrinking, drowning beneath the truth. Dr. Moreau stepped in front of him. What she's saying, she murmured, is precisely what Interpol will soon confirm. You operated a laundering pipeline for stolen art. Through the walls of this very estate. Langford's lip trembled. Do you know what they do to people accused of cultural theft across borders? She continued. Prison is the least of your concerns. Clara's knees weakened. This world of wealth, power, and international crime, she never imagined her daughter would be pulled into its core. But Harrington surprised everyone, not with anger, not with fear, but with focus. Send every questionable item to the clean room, he ordered. I want independent examiners flown in tonight. From Paris, London, Tokyo, no delays. Executives scrambled, now moving as if their lives depended on it, because in a way, they did. The collapse of a single heirloom collection at this scale could bankrupt foundations, trigger diplomatic tension, destroy generational wealth, and in the center of that storm stood a maid's daughter. Dr. Moreau approached her once more. "Child," she said softly, "you have just redirected the trajectory of an entire institution." Amina swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to." "You didn't have to," Dr. Moreau replied. Truth doesn't ask permission. Langford sat trembling in his chair, finally silent. Finally defeated, hands clasped in a cage of his own making. The officers stepped behind him. Ready. Waiting. Harrington turned to them. "Not yet," he said quietly. "I want every detail recorded first. Every file pulled. Every discrepancy exposed." He turned back to Amina. "And she will review them with us." Clara gasped. "Sir, she's just a little girl." Harrington shook his head slowly. "No, she is the only one here who actually sees." The room bowed to that truth. Power had flipped. Status had inverted. The hierarchy of the wealthy had fractured. And the next phase, the legal, public, catastrophic fallout, prepared to strike. News never walks, it runs. And that evening, it sprinted across continents. Before the gallery lights even cooled, a reporter from Le Monde tweeted a cryptic message: "Major scandal unfolding in the Langford estate. A child has identified a forged masterpiece. Authorities mobilizing." Within minutes, the story surged across Parisian news circles. Within an hour, 3 international art networks launched emergency live streams. And by dawn, the entire world knew. Drone cameras hovered over the estate gates, flashing red beacons that painted the stone walls like a crime scene. Reporters pressed against iron bars, microphones raised high, shouting questions drowned by the roar of vehicles entering the grounds. Black SUVs, white archival vans, gray Interpol sedans. Every color of authority converged. Inside, the estate's staff huddled together, whispering panicked fragments. How did this happen? Was he stealing for years? What will happen to us? Executives, once confident peacocks strutting through marble hallways, now moved like ghosts, faces pale, hands trembling, eyes darting toward every security camera, because now everything was evidence. Every whisper, every signature, every overlooked audit. Interpol's Cultural Property Crimes Unit advanced first. Their lead investigator, a stern woman with frost-white hair tied back in a severe knot, introduced herself simply, "Commander Elise Duval. This site is under joint jurisdiction now." Her officers roped off entire wings of the mansion, sealing antique doors with bright yellow tags marked "Seized." Conservators followed with specialized carts, rolling under temperature-controlled shields. They lifted paintings one by one, some originals, some forgeries, some heartbreakingly. Long-lost pieces flagged in international databases. Amina watched them carry away a portrait she'd quietly adored for years, now revealed to be stolen from a Spanish monastery in 1983. Clara wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders, trying to protect her from the magnitude of what she had set in motion. But Amina didn't step back. She stared ahead, steady, as if the truth deserved her courage. Inside the estate, Harrington faced cameras. He stood behind a podium hastily set up in the grand foyer, the same foyer where gala guests once laughed beneath chandeliers. Now it was a battlefield of microphones. Harrington cleared his throat, voice weighted by decades of reputation. Earlier today, a young girl uncovered evidence of extensive forgery and theft inside this estate. We acknowledge the gravity of this crisis. Every artifact will undergo independent verification. We will cooperate fully with international authorities. A reporter barked, "Is it true the revelation came from the maid's daughter?" Harrington didn't flinch. "Yes," he said, and she saw what none of us did. That sentence detonated across global media. Hashtags erupted. Amina, the art whisperer, Langford fraud, truth has no rank, girl who saw the fake clips of Amina calling out the forgery played on every screen from New York coffee shops to Moroccan markets to Tokyo train stations. Meanwhile, Langford's lawyer scrambled to craft a narrative, but every attempt collapsed under fresh evidence pouring out by the hour. Art historians, Interpol analysts, financial regulators all traced the same pattern. This wasn't incompetence. This was criminal architecture, and at the center of the storm, a man who once mocked a maid now watched his empire dissolve piece by piece. As dawn brightened the estate, Commander Duval issued her final order for the night. No one leaves the premises. Everyone is a potential witness. Amina squeezed her mother's hand. The world had changed, and Layer 19 would reveal just how deep the damage ran. By the next morning, the Langford estate no longer felt like a home. It felt like a fallen kingdom awaiting judgment. The grand ballroom, once a dazzling sanctuary of chandeliers and champagne, was now filled with portable evidence tables, harsh white lights, and rows of sealed crates containing seized art. Langford sat isolated in a corner, wrists trembling, hair disheveled, staring at nothing. He looked like a man aging by the hour, as if every minute peeled away another layer of his carefully constructed life. Commander Duval approached him with a folder so thick it seemed to hold the weight of nations. "Mr. Langford," she said calmly, "this is the preliminary list of items flagged as stolen or forged." She placed the folder on the table. It hit with a heavy thud. Langford flinched. Her voice remained cold and clinical. "Spain, Italy, Morocco, Brazil, France, 17 countries are filing formal requests for statements. Some want extradition." Langford's throat bobbed. "That's impossible. I couldn't have—" "You didn't paint the forgeries," she interrupted. "But you laundered them, displayed them, insured them, sold them, bought them," echoed another voice. Dr. Moreau stepped into the ballroom holding a sealed evidence bag. Inside, it was a tiny fragment of canvas, aged, cracked, unmistakably old. "From the archives you destroyed," she added, "we recovered part of the original ledger beneath a false floorboard, a sloppy place to hide it." Langford's eyes widened. "You lied about restoration records, you fabricated entire provenance chains, you sold repainted replicas as cultural treasures." Duval continued, "There are now 43 confirmed illegal transactions. That number will climb." Around them, cameras clicked. Every moment documented. Every twitch of Langford's hand recorded. Across the room, Amina quietly observed the scene. Her small hands were clasped in front of her, but her gaze didn't waver. She was witnessing consequences, the kind adults said rarely came for powerful men. But today they had. Outside the estate, the world had turned into a roaring storm. News vans lined the entire street. Reporters braved the cold, broadcasting updates and rapid-fire commentary. Interpol raids continued throughout the night. Langford's international holdings are frozen pending investigation. Major donors express outrage. Auctions involving Langford collections halted across Europe. And everywhere, one name rose above the noise: Amina. Her story had become a symbol. Not of scandal, but of truth, spoken by someone society never expected to speak. Parents tweeted about her courage. Art historians praised her intuition. Universities in Paris and London issued public invitations offering scholarships. Clara, watching the news through a cracked kitchen doorway, clutched her chest in disbelief. Her daughter, a Maid's child, was now being called the girl who could see what experts could not. Inside, the fallout spread deeper. Harrington convened an emergency meeting with trustees via secure video feed. Faces appeared in small squares, grim, exhausted, furious. One trustee spoke through clenched teeth. "We trusted Langford. He assured us every acquisition was vetted." A second trustee adjusted his glasses, voice shaking with anger. "We will lose partnerships." Possibly accreditation. Donors are already withdrawing. A third voice cut in sharply. Who approved his autonomy? Who allowed this level of unchecked control? Harrington didn't speak. He didn't defend himself. He simply listened. Because they were right. He had trusted Langford too much, respected lineage too deeply, ignored whispers too often, and a child had seen what he, with all his authority, had missed. Legal teams entered next, rows of sharp-dressed attorneys carrying laptops and documents thicker than bricks. They set up in the library, transforming its mahogany shelves into a battlefield of litigation. A lead attorney briefed Harrington. Spain is filing immediate claims. Italy follows in 2 hours. Morocco is preparing charges related to cultural property theft. She clicked to the next slide. We also anticipate civil suits from donors who paid millions for pieces now confirmed as forged. Another lawyer added, insurance companies will sue for restitution. They covered premiums on fraudulent items. Harrington pinched the bridge of his nose. How much are we exposed to? Over $300 million, at minimum. Silence. Cold. Suffocating. Absolute. In the West Wing, Langford's personal office was sealed and swarming with investigators. They pulled out safes hidden behind false panels, recovered USB drives taped beneath drawers, opened safes disguised as books. Every discovery painted a darker picture. Private sales with shell corporations, unregistered offshore accounts, encrypted emails negotiating the movement of stolen works. You kept everything, Commander Duval muttered. Criminals rarely archive their crimes so neatly. Langford's shoulders shook. I never meant for this to go so far. Dr. Moreau's expression hardened. You meant every step. You simply never expected to be caught. Her words cut like glass. Near the hallway, Amina stood before a painting now confirmed as stolen. She tilted her head, listening to something only she perceived. Clara knelt beside her. Are you frightened? She whispered. Amina shook her head softly. No, I feel sad. Sad for what, my love? Amina placed a hand over her heart. For the stories in these paintings, they were taken from people who loved them. Clara closed her eyes. Her daughter understood more than truth. She understood the weight of it. The day ended with the most devastating blow. A leaked government statement announced that Langford's citizenship status was under review. If he had trafficked art across borders, he could face charges on 3 continents. Internet reactions erupted. Some demanded prison. Others demanded extradition. A few insisted this was only the beginning, and they were all right, because tomorrow, the interrogation would begin, and Layer 20 would bring the final reckoning. Morning arrived with a thin, cold light that slid across the marble floors like a blade. The Langford estate, once a monument to wealth, felt more like a courthouse now. Stripped of illusion, stripped of grandeur, stripped of the man who once commanded it. Commander Duval stood at the center of the ballroom where the interrogation table had been moved. Her officers surrounded the space like a silent ring of judgment. Langford sat across from her. His suit was wrinkled, tie loosened, hair unkempt. His eyes, once full of entitlement, looked hollow, as if he had spent the night replaying every arrogant moment that had led him to this chair. Duval placed a recorder on the table. This is the formal interrogation of Jonathan Charles Langford, she announced, regarding charges of cultural theft, art laundering, fraudulent acquisition, falsification of provenance records, and international trafficking of protected artworks. Langford swallowed hard. Duval pressed the button. The red light blinked. State your full name. Langford hesitated, then whispered, Jonathan Charles Langford. Her voice remained calm, almost emotionless. Mr. Langford, do you understand that anything you say can be used against you across several jurisdictions? Yes. Then let's begin. She slid a document toward him, one of dozens, a painting inventory, each line marked with red stamps, stolen, forged, illegally transferred, improper export. Langford stared at the list. His lips trembled. I didn't know. Everything, he whispered. I trusted my suppliers. I thought, Dr. Moreau interrupted, stepping into the room with controlled precision. You thought your wealth made you untouchable. Langford's eyes snapped up. No, he protested weakly. I thought I could manage it. Manage it, she repeated coldly. Forgeries worth millions. Artworks ripped from orphanages, monasteries, private collectors. You manage this? Her voice cracked through the room like a whip. You didn't manage anything. You stole history. Langford buried his face in his hands. Duval continued, Let's go case by case. And the hours unfolded like a tragic opera. Each accusation met with evidence. Each denial shattered by documentation. Every lie pulled out by the root. Every defense dismantled. By noon, Langford no longer argued. He no longer explained. He no longer pretended. He only nodded, slowly, painfully, as the truth nailed itself into the last corners of his collapsing world. By afternoon, prosecutors joined the estate, and the charges were formalized. In the gallery, now emptied of stolen art, Duval read the list in front of cameras. 72 total violations under international cultural protection laws, 43 fraudulent acquisitions, 9 cases of laundering, multiple counts of criminal deception, and obstruction of international recovery investigations. Flashbulbs exploded. News networks cut into live broadcasts. Langford stood beside his lawyer, pale as stone, leaning slightly as if the words were physically crushing him. Reporters shouted questions. Will he be extradited to Spain? Will the foundation collapse? What happens to the estate? But one question silenced the entire room. Is it true a child began this investigation? Harrington stepped forward, voice steady. Yes. A hush fell, and she saw what none of us dared to see. 2 weeks later, Langford faced his first court appearance, handcuffed, escorted by officers, flanked by cameras, his empire gone, his wealth frozen, his reputation erased. The judge denied bail. International courts filed for extradition hearings. Donors sued for damages. Museums cut ties with the Langford name permanently. His downfall became a case study, a warning taught in universities about the dangers of unchecked power. But Amina wasn't present for any of it. She was somewhere else, somewhere quieter, somewhere far more important. 1 year later. Spring sunlight filtered through the windows of a small Parisian classroom. Children chattered softly, pencils tapping like tiny drum beats. On the wall hung paintings, real ones, each with a description written neatly in French. At the center of the room sat a desk with a little brass plaque, Amina Diallo, visiting young scholar, École du Patrimoine, a scholarship created just for her. A teacher with soft eyes approached Clara, who stood near the back wiping away tears. She has a gift, the teacher whispered. She sees things others spend decades trying to train into their eyes. Clara looked at her daughter at the front of the class, leaning over a canvas, studying a brushstroke, tilting her head with quiet concentration. Not because anyone expected it, not because anyone forced it, but because it was who she was, a guardian of truth born from a life where she was never meant to have a voice. Nearby, Harrington waited with his hands behind his back, looking far older and humbler than he once had. Clara, he said gently, may I speak to her for a moment? Clara nodded. He approached Amina, kneeling beside her so he wasn't towering above. Amina, he said softly, Paris has welcomed you beautifully. But I have something else for you, She looked up from her canvas. He handed her a sealed envelope embossed with an unfamiliar crest. "A letter," he explained, "from the Cultural Heritage Council. They want you to join their junior advisory program next summer." Amina blinked. "What do they want me to do?" Harrington smiled. "Simply, keep seeing what others don't." Meanwhile, across the world, Langford served his sentence in a Swiss detention facility designed for high-profile international offenders. He had no art, no wealth, no estate, no audience, only silence. Silence that forced him to face the truth of everything he had taken, everything he had hidden, everything he had believed he deserved. He received thousands of letters, not of sympathy but of condemnation, education, reflection. Some came from museums, some from cultural boards, some from countries whose stolen art he had displayed. But one letter stood out. It came from Amina. Just one sentence. "People who take what isn't theirs will always lose what they never valued." Langford folded the letter and placed it inside his drawer, reading it every night as if it were a verdict more powerful than any handed down by a judge. Back in Paris, Clara and Amina walked along the Seine. Warm light bounced off the water. People strolled past with coffee cups and books tucked under arms. "Do you miss home?" Clara asked gently. Amina thought for a moment. "I miss where I came from," she said. "But not who I was." Clara tightened her grip. "You were always this person, my love." "The world was just slow to notice," Amina smiled. A quiet, beautiful truth. They stopped on a bridge overlooking the river, sunlight shimmering like a golden path toward the future. A future Amina had opened with a single sentence. "That painting is fake." A sentence that toppled an empire, a sentence that rebuilt lives, a sentence that revealed the truth no one else dared to face. And as the camera of life panned outward, capturing mother and daughter framed against the Paris skyline, the narrator's voice would whisper, "Truth does not need permission. Truth only needs courage." Fade out. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your voice helps uncover the next story that deserves to be told. Tell us in the comments, have you ever seen something everyone else ignored? Your moment might be the next truth the world needs.